Good morning. New content this week includes learning about while loops. And there's a lot of good resources on how to write a loop, especially a while loop. So, a loop is used when you want to repeat code. And the syntax of a while loop is always going to be something like this: while some Boolean expression is true, we will execute the statements inside the while loop that are enclosed by a set of these curly brackets. The condition may be any expression that evaluates to true or false. If you wanted to look at this in terms of a flow chart, it would look something like this. Like you arrive at the condition, and if the condition is true, you execute the block of code that's between these curly brackets. And then after you're done, you go back up and check the condition again. And if the condition is still true, you execute the block of code and you just repeating this so you visually can see of this looping effect. When the condition goes false, you skip around that block of code and that you keep going with the program. If this condition is never true, you never execute this block of code. So if the condition's never true, you go around this way. When you're dealing with a while loop, you have to make sure that this condition will eventually go false. Otherwise, you'll be stuck in something called an infinite loop. So we'll take a look at an example of that. Typically, with a while loop, we will have something called a loop counting variable that increments every time through the loop so that eventually there's a way that this condition will go false. So let's take a look at some examples. So I'm going to be giving you this code, and I wanted to walk through some real simple examples. So the first example is I have a counting variable that I'm setting to 0. And as long as the counting variable is less than 5, this condition's true. I go inside the loop. I'll print the value of the counting variable. And then here's my example of my loop counting variable that I referred to. After I'm done, and when I've reached the end of the block of code, I increment. So this becomes 1. I go back up. I check the condition is 1 less than 5. It is. I go inside. I print count. Then I increment again to 2 until eventually count reaches 5. When 5 is less than 5, this evaluates to false, and I continue on with this program. So if I run this chunk of code, you'll see that I print the values 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, a lot of times after, we'll put a print statement in here uh, to print the value after the loop ends. So I'll add that in right here. Value of count after loop ends equals, and that should be 5. So let's go ahead and run that so you can see that. Okay, so 5 made the condition go false, and that's why it ends the loop. So I'm going to comment this out. And now I'm going to uncomment the next chunk of code. The next chunk of code is what I'm calling example 2. And here's an example where instead of incrementing the loop counting variable, we decrement. So I have a variable I that I've set to 10. And as long as I is greater than 1, this condition is true, and then we'll print the value of I. After we print the value of I, we decrement that value by 1, so 9. I go back up. Is 9 greater than 1? It is. I go inside. I print I decrement to 8, and so on. And I keep going until eventually this decrements down to 1. So when 1 is greater than 1, this condition goes false. We continue on with the rest of the program. So you can see that that's true. And I think once again, I will print the value of the loop counting variable. So you can see that it was a value of 1, the value of I after the loop ends. So you can see that it eventually did go to 1, and that made the loop go false, the loop condition go false. So I'm going to comment this out, and let's take a look at another chunk of code. So this is what I'm calling example number 3. And here's an example where every time through the loop, instead of incrementing or decrementing by 1, I chose to increment by 5. So I'm using X. It starts off as 2. 2 is less than 20. I go inside. I print the value of X. But then I add 5. And then I move to the next line. So I'm ready for more output. So the second time through, it's 7. 7 less than 20. I print, I add 5, then 12 less than 20, I print, I add 5, 17 less than 20, I print, I add 5, and then finally it's going to be a value of 22 that ends that loop. So the value of X after the loop ends should be 22. Let's go ahead and run this so you can see that. So here's all those values. Now, the one thing you have to watch out for when you're dealing with loops, it doesn't matter if it's while loops, any loop, is the worry that you're going to create something called an infinite loop. And that means a situation where this condition never goes false, so you're stuck in here forever. So for example, if j is equal to 10, and then my condition is as long as j is greater than 1, which it is, I'm going to print j. But then if I increment j, the next value will be 11. It'll still be true. Print. Then 12, then 13. This is just continuing to go up. This condition never goes false. So that's an example of an infinite loop. And if you study this output, it's just going to keep printing, and you physically have to end the program. So we have to watch out when we establish those conditions. So I'm going to be giving you this code, and I encourage you to, I'm going to uncomment everything except the last one, because the last one is the one that's going to make this program not run. So please make sure you're spending time each day getting yourselves caught up. We're fast approaching another progress check at the end of the week, okay? So we need to make sure that we're spending the time so we're not getting too far behind. So have a good week. Thank you.